And you and I will start and introduce as we wait for Pastor Hughes to come here. Hello, Barb. Nice to see you. We are at the Buffalo and Erie County Central Library, and I'm here. We have Chris and Barb, two of our wonderful supporters, and Leslie Latham is joining us, which is wonderful. So we'll have three ministers in the room, and which is fantastic. Hi, Leslie. And our discussion today, I'm going to introduce, first of all, I'm Jonathan Friedrich, a rabbi here in Buffalo. We will be joined eventually by Pastor Riley Hughes, who is my accomplice for justice. We have Pastor Leslie Latham here as well, which is amazing. It's so great to see you. And in addition, we have two of our wonderful supporters, Barb and Chris. Chris, who is live and in person with us in the library. Oh, Leslie, you're outside on your deck. That looks wonderful. And our conversation today is about Huck Finn. And the reason Pastor Hughes and I have undertaken the Huck Finn question is not just because of James. Although we're using this as an entry point. Pastor Hughes has rejoined us. Everything okay?
Everything is okay.
Okay. So James is a wonderful book, and we're going to talk more about it. But part of where we have gotten to this point is actually in response to a podcast and an article by an amazing historian, Jill Lepore, on Elon Musk's use and abuse of sci-fi. And not to be confused with Nietzsche's use and abuse of history. But in any event, Elon Musk is planning on naming his Mars-going spaceship after the spaceship used by the villain, the buffoon, in The Hitchhiker's Guide for the Galaxy, which means he identifies with the wrong person. And so this led Pastor Hughes and I to talk about this whole idea of, if we told our stories better, if we told our stories of who we have been and who we are, then we might in fact have better stories to tell about who we will be too. And that we are in really such a moment of missed communication, misfacting of everything, that we wanted to start with, at least a story that we've been arguing about for 140 years. Since Huck Finn, as many of you know, was not a story without controversy when it came out, and since then. It is, I was asked at a July 4th celebration whether or not I thought Huck Finn ought to be read in high school. So I'm going to start with that question for all of us today. Should we read Huckleberry Finn in high school? And if so, why? And if not, why not? A thought?
Not everybody at once, huh?
Well, I have an opinion on this, as I'm sure all of you imagine, but and I can opine. Pastor Hughes, pro or con, Huckleberry Finn in high school?
Pro.
Why?
Because it gives a true account of life in the South. Can everybody hear me?
No, unmute.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm muted. All right. I say pro because while Huck Finn is a work of fiction, it is based on reality. It is based on the reality, at least in the mind of Mark Twain, of what life is like in the South, the juxtaposition of two cultures And I think that is very, very important for developing minds to understand that there are different ways. There are different ways to view the world. There are different lenses through which one can view the world. And an intelligent person understands that, hey, my view is not the only view available, that there are other people who have different lived experiences. And I'm only saying that because this book left an impression on me when I read it in high school. All right. I didn't really want to read the book at all because I had grown tired of slave narratives and, all this other kind of things in literature. But after reading it in high school and, having a teacher to guide us through the book and to guide us through the socio-economic issues that were brought up in the book, has left an indelible mark on my brain. So I think it's very important that especially today, that they read this book, yeah, and study it, not just read it, but to study it.
Any other thoughts? Yes, Barb.
Myself here. Yeah. Okay. So I definitely think it should be read in high school. Huck was so conflicted between, good and evil, right and wrong. And throughout the book, he develops a true sense of humanity. And I think it would be a really good discussion for high school kids.
So why, therefore, all the controversy? Why, therefore, I mean, let's there is no earlier American literature that creates an African American protagonist, much less an enslaved person as a protagonist. So, Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens was hailed as creating the American novel with this book, depending upon who you talk to. So, why the controversy? If we are
treats an enslaved African American as a human being, it's very clear from the book that he's not a type. He's a person. And I think that it's always controversial in the West.
Even today.
Even today.
Even today.
Yeah. Even today. And so I think that's why it's controversial.
Okay, so for lack of a better word, we're saying it's controversial because of racism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we can write that word on the board and point to it like
At this point, right?
in many, many contexts, right?
Okay, so if it's controversial, yeah, Leslie.
Okay, true confession, I have not reread Huck. I'm in the middle of James. I have read Huck, I don't know, 4 times probably, for high school and for college, and for pleasure as well. I think that people do not understand Twain's heightened sense of irony and sarcasm. And, we can't teach that because it uses the N-word, not understanding the lengths to which Twain uses the N-word to create discomfort and sarcasm.
Okay, so for sure, I think we can all agree that the American public is not cognizant of things like irony and sarcasm in general, or is going to read it for the maximum level of stupid offense, to be entirely unfair. Tay, you wanted to add?
Well, not a lot, because I've only just started reading it. I read the first chapter or 2, I think, and then I read the last chapter to see. The last chapter was fascinating, but I won't say anything. But and I did read James, and as Barb knows, we had a library book club discussion about it. Yeah, I feel that people think that people will be offended, but I think that's why it's important, certainly for high school kids, to understand what the past was like. Well, and still to some degree is, not quite to that extent. And I'm also kind of fascinated, and I mentioned this at the book club, with the fact that Huck is not a cool, important, dominant kid. I mean, he's the outsider among his friends. So I think that maybe that's where we're going to some extent in the book. And I think that's where it went sort of in James was, yeah, Huck kind of identified with what it was like. And as far as banning the word nigger goes, now I'm not, you know, I'm obviously not only white, but the European, I'm a Mayflower descendant. So I'm not even, from other countries kind of thing, obvious. So I've never been through that. But I would think using the word, way kids, I bought an edition of the book that says it was the event in its original form. Yeah, the original unabridged and uncensored 1885 version, because I'm not even sure what they're allowing in schools by now. I mean, there's been that. Now, I don't know. Is it offensive for a kid to even hear the word nigger if you're African American, black?
Well, I'm gonna ask Tay, as the white guy in the room, uh, for us to not say the N word,
Oh, okay. Sorry.
just
Okay.
as a norm.
Yeah.
Were I in fact reading Huck Finn with a bunch of high school students, I don't think I would performatively say the N word either. Now, interestingly enough, I'm with you on the unabridged nature of it. I've listened to the book now a couple of times, including with a recording that I very much value, Elijah Wood doing all the voices, and he does a great job with all the accents. And I think it's as a performance, it's important to both read and maybe hear the word in context. I don't feel qualified to say the word in any context because
Okay.
there's no way that word is anything but you know a weapon from somebody who looks like me.
Okay. Then
And
I won't say it again.
no,
And
no, no,
there are probably words like that about women too that shouldn't be used, or that men
100
use behind our back, as far as that.
100%, 100%. One of the things I'd like to point out, first of all, an interesting point on the whole Huck Finn as a protagonist slash narrator question is that people have often said that Tom Sawyer was a kid's book with an adult narrator because there's an sort of a omniscient adult narrator, and Huckleberry Finn is an adult book narrated by a kid.
Mm.
And I think that's a fair categorization. I think the reason why I'm pro this book as a snapshot of Mark Twain's version of the 1840s, because it's roughly set in the 1840s, 1830s, 1840s, depending on sort of his childhood, is that the moral question that Huck faces is not really between right and wrong, but between what society calls right and what he feels is right. So he feels that he's going to go to hell because he has participated in stealing and not returning someone else's property, namely Jim. And he feels that that is fundamentally wrong, and therefore he might as well go to hell. And I think that is an entirely age-appropriate question for somebody in high school, for somebody in college, and for an adult. That those questions, and it highlights, I think, a central question of who we are.
Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and more. The library is on social media. Hope you will follow us to hear about the latest programs and activities.
And here I was thinking I had left something out, but it turns out the library is in fact advertising with us. This broadcast brought to you by the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library.
And viewers like you.
So in any event, I think the use of a time period piece like Huckleberry Finn is to do our best to accurately enter into where we come from. to understand who we are.
Hmm.
And I think we are in a moment of American history right now where people are deciding that we should continue to tell falsehoods about who we were to maintain an oppressive sense of who we are. What are those falsehoods? Those falsehoods we've been fighting over for the last 200 years, if not 300 years. Number one, on this one, that the Civil War was not fought over slavery. We had public officials, candidates for president, who could not do anything but equivocate over the reasons for the Civil War. In the last election cycle, Nikki Haley could not say that the question of slavery was at the heart of the Civil War. Why is that? I would say it is that way because in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, we didn't hold the perpetrators, the traitors accountable for a second. And that seems eerily familiar to the degree that we don't hold insurrectionists accountable.
Yeah.
Yes, Pastor Hughes.
I'm trying to unmute myself.
Trying to.
All
I
right.
could hear you. You're good, I think.
Oh, okay. Then, all right.
Yeah. We can.
Gosh, I was still trying to respond back at the N-word situation because I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole of the N-word situation, but I did want to address some of those things before we move forward. The question was, I don't remember who particularly asked it, but the question was, is the use of the N-word appropriate or offensive to African Americans?
Mhm.
And my response as an African American is yes and no. Because the N-word is one of those words that really depends on the context. It depends on its usage. It depends on who's using it. It depends on inflection. It could be any number of things. People can interpret it many different ways. It is a colloquialism. There is so much nuance to that word that I can honestly say that if I were well, I'll just be honest. When we read Huckleberry Finn in high school, my teacher said every word written in that book. She was a white woman. She was an older white woman. I was in high school in Atlanta, Georgia. That my high school was 50-50 black and white. We were a merged school. It was a black school and a white school that had merged. There was a lot of racial tension in the air that nobody really talked about. And yet, here we are in literature class, AP literature, I'll never forget it. And my teacher, who incidentally it was the mother of Jasmine Guy, shameless plug, she said the word all the time. Okay. And her justification was, this is the literature, this is the text. And she said that we need to understand the text, we need to understand the history, we need to understand the culture that the text is trying to tell us. And in those days, they said the word all the time, and it meant different things to different people, right? Also, again, you talked about performance. I mean, it's this, and I would even say that's the same, it's the same thing. When you're performing something, you have to be true to what you are performing. What my problem about the N-word is that it has become a weapon, but for the wrong reasons. Okay. My issue with the N-word is that it was used as a weapon against African Americans, and then African Americans co-opted the word and made it a term of endearment for each other. Whether that be right or wrong, that's what we did. So we took the power away from that word and then we gave it power for us. And so all of a sudden, when the word was a weapon against us, everyone had the freedom to use it indiscriminately. But as soon as we took the word and made it our own, all of a sudden it's it's offensive. All of a sudden we shouldn't use it. So use the word. I'm reminded of Samuel Jackson. Samuel Jackson was acting in a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, a Quentin Tarantino movie. Django Unchained. And in this movie, Leonardo DiCaprio played a slave owner. And in the script, he had to say the N-word many, 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 many times. And as they were rehearsing and as they were practicing for this film, Leonardo DiCaprio was like, man, I'm saying this too much. I don't want. And Samuel Jackson was like, just say it. Just say the word. Just say it. It's in the script. We're talking about the 1800s here. Everyone used that word. Black people used it. White people used it. Chinese people used it. Everybody used the word. If we're going to perform it according to the timepiece, then we must be true to the time. And if you've ever seen Django Unchained, you'll know that, at least for me, that was a very powerful film. I loved it. I loved all aspects of it. So, in a nutshell, that's my that's my take on the N-word situation. Say the word as long as it is in, right context.
And I'm still going to stand by the idea that I shouldn't say the word. And because permission from you, I'm not going to take as permission from every African American who might hear me say
Of
it.
course not.
And so I think I'm going to err on the side of caution for me. And I think it's a complicated question.
I wasn't giving you permission specifically. I was just saying, let's
I
not be
heard
so
encouragement.
afraid. Okay.
No.
Let's not be so afraid, because I'm not so
Ironic.
afraid. If anyone calls me that in this room, I'm not going to get offended unless you meant it for ill.
To offend.
To offend, right? And when you say it to offend, then I will take offense. But if you're saying it, just like Charlotte was saying, I didn't feel offended at all, because we're talking about Huck Finn. The word is used like 100,
So here's an interesting question from the Huck Finn perspective, right? Mark Twain received a huge amount of negative feedback for the book throughout the entirety, and he played it up, right? He was like,
Yep.
He more than anybody understood that negative attention was still attention, and by all means, ban my book, and then everybody's going to go out and buy more of it. That's fine. He basically said that, and of course, what an interesting question. I'm just thinking about it, that Mark Twain is a white guy with an empowered, famous white guy who can afford to do that. What happens, in the hypothetical, if the author of a book like Huckleberry Finn is actually African American? If so, and then there's this whole question of is Uncle Tom's Cabin or Huckleberry Finn the better anti-slavery book, which is also a question that's entered into.
Neither of them were.
Neither of them were good anti-slavery books.
Neither one of them were good anti-slave.
Why do you say that?
They weren't anti-slave. They weren't anti-slave. Well, not from my reading and my interpretation.
Okay, so why do you say Huckleberry Finn is not an anti-slavery book?
Because it wasn't about anti-slavery. It was telling a story about a boy who was having some issue. He had compassion for a human being, but he also understood that what he was doing was illegal. So this was in more of a moral thing than it was an anti-slavery thing.
Okay,
in my opinion.
So I think this is a really valid question, because the question is raised actually in James, sort of jumping ahead, as to whether or not the troupe of white minstrel singers are abolitionists. And
oh my God.
So and the question I think is relevant here, because being anti-slavery and being an abolitionist are not the same thing.
I agree.
In the 1840s and 1850s or 1860s, right? So that we have this significant range of opinion about being against slavery, right? Abraham Lincoln didn't start out as an abolitionist, but Abraham Lincoln was anti-slavery before he was an abolitionist.
Okay. Well,
He wasn't an anti-racist.
okay.
He was still a racist. He didn't think slavery was a good idea though. And
Anyway,
I mean,
let's not go there.
but I think we certainly see over time, right? You know, the staunch abolitionists, right, at uh, William Lloyd Garrison didn't feel that the United States was worth saving over slavery, right? He was
Yeah.
against the United States. He burned
Yeah.
a copy of the Constitution.
Turn it down. Yeah.
Uh, you know, making him, in fact, more radical than Frederick Douglass,
Mhm.
who, as an abolitionist, is still pro-institutionalist in that he feels that the United States can be reformed. He even, you know, will use the Declaration of Independence in a way that Thomas Jefferson never intended, which it inspires Abraham Lincoln
Exactly.
to use
Yeah.
the Declaration in a way that. So I am going to take the position that I think Huckleberry Finn is an effective anti-slavery book because I think it undermines the very idea that it is okay to own people, period. And I think it makes the moral case that owning people is wrong. And that therefore it undermines slavery. And therefore it is a good way of teaching humanity to its readers. That's my hypothesis. I'm throwing it out there to be attacked.
Disagree, but okay.
Okay, so tell me.
I disagree. Well, okay. Let me not say I disagree. I just don't see it that way. How about that? I hear what you're saying, and oh, if everyone can still hear me, I won't have to unmute myself. Can everybody hear me?
Okay, everyone can hear you.
Okay.
Good.
I don't, I hear where you're coming from, and I've never heard that before. Never heard anyone say that Huck Finn was an anti-slavery book. That's intriguing, but I just don't see it that way. I don't see it that way. I hear what you're saying, that yes, this was about the moral convictions of someone who felt that it was wrong to own people. I get that. But I just don't equate that with anti-slavery. I don't think that's what it was about. I just don't see it that way. For me, okay, hypothetically speaking, if I would accept it as an anti-slavery book if you had no moral confusion about it. If there wasn't this, hey, I'm being righteous, but I'm worried that I'm not doing the right thing, right? For me, as a descendant of a slave, that's not the same thing, right? That's not an argument. That's not even a thing. If it's being righteous to set people free, then set them free and feel confident and feel justified in your breaking the law. That's anti-slave. There's a series called The Good Lord Bird. It's about John Brennan and his abolitionist Ethan Hawke. Very over the top, very melodramatic. I don't like it at all.
Did you like the book?
I love the book. Did not like the show.
I haven't seen the show.
But I would say that that's more anti-slavery because he did whatever it took to set people free. He didn't have any kind of moral consternation about it. He knew what he was doing was right, and he knew exactly what needed to be done. And he will burn down anything. He'll shoot anybody to do it. That's anti-slavery. For me, it's not anti-slavery to say, well, I'm going to set you free because it's wrong for you to be a slave, but doggone it, man, I am stealing someone's property. I don't know. That's too much on the fence for me.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this topic? Yes, Reverend Leisler.
I don't like binaries. I don't like it's either all right or all wrong.
Yeah.
I don't like black, white. I don't like I just don't like binaries. I think that there is a huge area to understand that people are morally ambiguous and complex, and that Mark Twain, as a writer, was not a perfect human being. I don't think anybody could argue that he was a morally upright all the time person, which I think causes more interest as you explore the depths of your own moral ambiguities and how you act when confronted with such situations, whether you take the side of, yes, well, let's go down the river, but yes, I'm going to try to get you back because you are stolen property, even though I don't agree with all of the precepts of people owning people. I think there's a depth of um, one would hope maturation that we arrive at as we read and explore and go through all sorts of experiences. That's it.
I appreciate that. You know, I think we're in a quandary on this, in a deep quandary, which is that we need the statement of what's right and wrong. And we also need the exploration of how do we get there? And, you know, for me, Pastor Hughes, of course, I agree. Slavery is an absolute wrong,
Mhm.
and it needs to be fought. And I also agree that right now we need to figure out more than ever ways to talk with people who seem to hold opinions that are absolutely wrong to us. That we are in a crisis of being able to talk with one another because we have so scoped out a litmus test of, I'm sorry, you believe this thing, I can't talk to you because you're wrong, so wrong that I can't possibly speak with you. And Pastor Hughes, I know you have something to say because this has been the crux of a lot of our conversations.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, and Reverend Latham, I want to say you are exactly right. I agree with you that there's so much nuance in this quandary that we have here. There's so much nuance, and it does the text a bit of a disservice to create a binary. You're exactly right. I agree with you on that. And that I'll have to ponder more on that moving forward because that has been such ingrained in my brain about this book for 30 years. So I'm going to have to go back and reevaluate that because you're right. There is nuance there, and nuance is important. But that also brings me to what you just said, Jonathan. You said that how do we interact with people who are diametrically opposed to us? How do we say, hey, that's wrong? But that is the line in the sand that I was saying. That's the line in the sand. Okay, I can be open-minded to certain things. We can disagree on a few things, but the line is this, right? This is my line. And so I will hold space for nuance. I will hold space for even tension, but I have to put the foot down, or we have to put a foot down to say that this is where we draw the line. Otherwise, we do what liberals and progressive has been doing for a long time now, and just moving, allowing and allowing and allowing things to push and push, and we don't do much about it. Oh, it's okay. We can hold you in space together. At some point, we're going to have to take a stand. So I, it seemed to me that you were sort of proving my point that this is the line, and that's why I felt like Huck was not an anti-slavery book because it wasn't definitive about anti-slavery to me, to my reading.
Okay, I hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I don't, I will put a fierce line out there.
Mhm.
So, yeah, Barb, and then Sharp, and then Ted.
Okay, yeah.
Well, to answer, you posed a question, how do we talk to people who are diametrically, opposed to our way of thinking? And I don't think that, I think we put too much emphasis on us talking and not listening. I think 75% of good communication and finding common ground is listening to the other person. And I guess that's really all I want to say about it. I mean, when you're talking to someone, you can't be telling them they're wrong. You know, you have to find another way.
Yeah.
Tay, you had something to say?
Well, two things actually now after what Barb said. I have a couple of books and I can sort of see them from here, but not well enough to tell you much about them, that my son and one of my friends talk about, that have to do with that idea of how do you talk to someone on the other side of things. And I do remember the beginning of the book where the guy, well, I won't take you into there, but there are several interesting books about it. And if we're going to text or something later or email, I might send the links because they are interesting. But
Well, it could be our next series, right?
Okay.
How to talk to people we disagree with.
That's an interesting thought. Well, what I want to bring up is sort of a story. Well, it's a true story. I have an ancestor who was an abolitionist starting in the 1830s. And he lived in Ohio. It's not like he was in the deep South or something, but anyway, he lived originally in Ohio and then eventually in Massachusetts. And what happened to him in the 1830s, he was a college professor, a math professor at what I think became, I've forgotten whether it was Northwestern, but one of the bigger universities, but he was a college professor in Ohio. And he and two other professors were told, okay, you've been abolitionists, you've been writing articles in the paper or talking and things. I don't remember what they did. But anyway, you have a choice. You can stay here and keep your job, or you can leave, because parents who read your things will not send their young people to our college if they're reading things from the college from abolitionists. Now, this was in Ohio, not the deep South. And so there you were. Well, he ended up in Massachusetts, and then I think fairly late in the Civil War, he and a bunch of people were arrested because there was somebody who had come into, I think it was Boston, but I wouldn't swear to that. I think it was Boston, to grab a fairly prominent escaped slave. And they had gone out and run a protest against this happening. I guess they were somehow had captured him and wanted the government to give him back or something. I don't remember the details. All I remember is the people who protested about that were put in jail. They were released eventually because other people objected. But it was quite a fight as far as that goes. And interestingly enough, when it came down to voting, and this is sort of a side note, but you may find it interesting, when it came to the question of would Black people be allowed to vote, the original version of it had to do with Black people and women could vote. And my abolitionist ancestor, who was very much in favor of women, one of his daughters was very techie and they did things together, and he was very much in favor of women, but he decided that if you had to choose, he really wanted the freed slaves to be allowed to vote. And he knew if they left women in, it would never get passed. So women had to lose their right to vote. So apparently it's all a matter, well, in a sense, that's not, okay, binary, I guess. We have to make choices, and maybe that's true. But yeah, I will keep track of what the books are because I can see them from here. Okay, sorry about that if I talk too much, but
No, not at all.
it's kind of a different point of view. It isn't Huck Finn exactly, but we're back into the Civil War. But the other thing I will say, and then I really will stop. We learned at the Library Book Club a couple of years ago in a book we read that the reason that we have one country was at the time of the American Revolution, the South apparently didn't particularly want to join the North in fighting the British. They kind of liked being there, except that was when the British were talking about not allowing slavery there. And therefore, if we were a British colony, slavery wouldn't be allowed here. And so that's why the South wanted to join. Apparently, otherwise, they didn't want to join, from what I read. This was probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago, so I don't really remember the details. But
This
They're
is-
apparently,
making a lot of
this
money
is-
selling that cotton to produce clothing in England and other places.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
whole thing too, right? No,
Right, and William Lloyd Harrison's point on this is that slavery is in fact written into the Constitution, right? That the three-fifths compromise, it's not a
Yeah.
compromise on enslaved people being actually three-fifths of a person. It's on enslavers being able to vote with three-fifths of the vote of all the people that they have enslaved. So it is
I didn't know that.
the dehumanization of enslaved people and the dehumanization of indigenous Americans is written into the Constitution. It's written into the Constitution in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that don't acknowledge women and deliberately don't acknowledge Native Americans. So, even when we're doing better, we're still holding on to what is an extractionist form of American capitalism that is at the heart and soul of our country from 1619 on, as soon as we decide that it's more important to make money out of people than to share profits with people. So that, we're still fighting this fight today, which is again sort of why I feel like it's really important to have a better sense of this. When we debate whether or not our students, whatever their ages are, should learn about our past in an honest way. That debate has often been framed in the South, in Florida, for example, as we don't want to make our students feel ashamed about being white Americans. Reverend Latham is laughing, right? Because, of course, to be conscious and a white American should be at least to be ashamed of the degree to which our advantages have come at the expense of other people, period. That doesn't mean that we need to be dominated by shame or we need to hate ourselves. It means we need to work to have a better society together and that our part needs to be admitted. Because again, and we've said it in this group any number of times, turning to African Americans and asking African Americans to solve racism is, in Ibram Kendi's one of his better formulations, like turning to the cancer patient and saying, "You've experienced cancer, solve it." So we need to do this together. We need to admit that, racism is a problem inflicted on African Americans by white Americans, and therefore it is our problem to solve together. Yeah, Pastor Hughes.
I think we really need to we need to do more effort into reframing things. I think what has been disturbing to me about the dismantling of DEI and the exclusion of African American history and any other non-white history is they're reframing it as something that they're reframing it as something that's supposed to make white kids hate America. And I think that is the issue, because I never thought that abolitionism and anti-slavery and anti-racism, I never thought that that was something to be ashamed of. I never thought that the Emancipation Proclamation was something to be ashamed of as an American. In fact, I always thought of that as a shining example of America taking steps in the right direction. I always thought that DEI and affirmative action and all these things, these measures were a sign of, hey, we acknowledge that there has been a problem and this is our attempt, poor may it be, but an attempt to redress those wrongs. And that's a good thing. And so I am disturbed by how all of these actions over the past 150 years now all of a sudden has been reframed as something detrimental to American public image, which, they're ignoring the fact that these advances that the country has had over the last 150 years were an example to the world, to the whole world. Like, all the other nations who have had people of color within them have taken inspiration from the things that we have done in this country when it comes to addressing racial issues. So, we have to, maybe one of the ways we can talk to people who disagree with us is maybe talking through reframing these things and saying that, hey, this is not to make you feel bad. In fact, it's to make you feel proud, because what you're doing is demonstrating that we as a country can fix this together.
Well, and a key element of being able to, as you said, fix it together is an admission of the one step forward, two steps back that we have lived through. That the first Reconstruction in the wake of the Civil War didn't last very long before it was replaced, before slavery was replaced by the system of Jim Crow. And the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, proud as we are of them, flawed as they are, didn't last very long at protecting due process for citizens before it was suddenly due process for companies and employers at the expense of employees and the citizens. And so we have constantly been in this back and forth, right? That Reconstruction led to the misnomer redemption, the worst word ever, to have the reclamation of oppression by the entirety of the formerly slaveholding states in imposing what was slavery by another name, and in deconstructing voting rights for everyone that they didn't want to vote. And that we had a second Reconstruction, a second civil rights movement, a second round of civil rights laws that is now being undone by what is, for all intents and purposes, a second redemption.
Mhm.
And so I think the model to the rest of the world that we ought to offer is this model of struggle. We are the only non-ethnic nation state in the world. There is no other nation state in the world that is not based in some way, shape, or form on ethnic nationality.
Hmm.
And it is not easy.
Jonathan, not what? The last word?
It is not easy.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, all right, sorry.
Right. So
And-
every other nation state in the world has an ethnic
Ethnicity.
identity.
Mm, mm,
You know, I can become a Chinese citizen, but I can never become Chinese.
right.
I can become an Irish citizen, but I can never become Irish. Same goes for Mexico or Brazil, and even in places like in amazing amalgam multi-ethnic places like Brazil, there is still a dominant ethnic identity to being Brazilian,
Mhm.
and there are minorities who are not. Same in Japan.
Same in Canada.
Same in Canada.
Exactly.
Hence the Quebecois question,
Yes.
right? The whole idea that one is either an Anglo-Canadian or a French-Canadian.
But then wouldn't that make Canada not?
No, it's multi, but it's dual.
It is.
It's a duopoly, right? Instead of a.
Okay.
The
I
ethnic nature of Canada is in dispute, but it is definitely.
Okay, all right. Yeah, okay, that puts a little paint where it in, okay.
So,
The argument might be that the people in power are trying to make this a monocultural
Yes.
country that with
100%,
just yeah.
Mhm.
100%.
And that's why you want South Africans coming here as refugees.
Well, so here's an interesting backlash, and I think it's a backlash. It's a question that I think is right in the square Huck Finn question. One of the things that struck me about how important it was to read Huckleberry Finn is because it reminded me about how public education, it was not a white man's value
Mm,
in the setting of Huckleberry Finn.
right.
That Pap Finn is against education in principle. That learning is contrary to his understanding of what it is to be a successful man in America. And so that the Huck Finn entry into the past for me was a reminder that public education, for example, has always been sought for and fought for by women and minorities in this country. And because it was viewed as an equalizer, but the Reverend Latham, as you pointed out, the quote unquote monoculture that wants to be dominant in this culture redefined whiteness to an interesting way right now, so that somehow we have some sort of white masculinity monoculture that they would like to establish as the norm. But in that, they don't want to share anything, which is exactly Pat Finn's perspective, that nothing should be shared, that we should have sort of an original colonial culture that, might makes right, and which is, if it goes back to, Once and Future King, where the author puts forward this idea that even that King Arthur and Merlin are in fact having a discussion about how to create a society where might makes right is not the norm. How do you have a fairness doctrine that isn't supported that doesn't only support the most powerful? So I think I'm going to stand on this idea that Huck Finn is an important part to get us into our past, to better understand our present. And I'm going to make my final case for it being somewhat anti-slavery.
Somewhat.
And I'm going to say that because I think Mark Twain in Huck Finn and W.E.B. Du Bois, really 50 years later in the 1930s, and writing Black Reconstruction, are fighting the fight of telling American history. And that the image of an enslaved person, being a human worth connecting to, being someone of value, is so countercultural in the 1840s that it is, for all intents and purposes, an anti-slavery argument that needs to be preserved, to say that all those who were in slaveholding states, all those who lived in enslaving families, were not denying the wrongness of what they did, that it wasn't all great, which is what redemption tried to put forward, that this wasn't about enslaving people, it was about states' rights. That,
State rights to own slaves.
the enslaved people, they were actually better off. That their lives were so much better when they didn't have to work for a living and own their own land and make their own decisions. And the plantation was an idyllic place. And I think when we view Mark Twain as the narrative source text that becomes W.E.B. Du Bois's deep attempt to re-legislate the telling of history in the 1930s, to remind everyone that the Klan's version of history, as put forward in the movie Birth of a Nation, was also propaganda, was also a bad retelling. Remember, because that's only in 1915 or 1916 when that movie comes out, and then Woodrow Wilson, our famous racist president, puts it on in the White House, is that we are telling a history, and that's only 50 years after the Civil War, that slavery was not the issue. And that it takes W.E.B. Du Bois 20 years later to say, what are we talking about? This is our real history. But he's fighting, in his time, a contemporary historical perspective that literally whitewashes slavery out of our history. And so if we view Mark Twain and Huckleberry Finn as sort of the 1885 entree into the argument that W.E.B. Du Bois attempts to seal with Black Reconstruction. And now we are laying the groundwork for James and Percival Everett, saying we need to continue to retell our history, because what is missing in Huckleberry Finn that comes forward in James is the depth of the terror of being an enslaved person, the awfulness of being whipped, the awfulness of being lynched, as we will see, for those of you who haven't read it yet, for stealing a pencil. and the normative nature of terror in lives of enslaved people, which is not something that comes through in Huckleberry Finn in the same way.
How could it? How could it come through? Because Mark Twain didn't know what it's like to be a slave. He can only speculate. And so he couldn't give the depth that that was there. Okay. And I think it's interesting you brought up W.E.B. Du Bois, because in the same way that he took Mark Twain's premise and tried to reimagine it, I think Percival Everett did the same with James, because not only did Percival Everett humanize James even more than Mark Twain did, but he also shattered the traditional slave trope. Not only was James a person, a human being, but he was also intelligent. He was literate. Okay.
Yeah.
How many slaves were literate back then? Not many.
We don't know.
You're right. We don't know. And that's
which is what Everett points out.
Exactly. We don't know. So he shatters all the tropes. And I mean, particularly what I love about James was he talks a lot about code switching. I don't know if you got picked up on that, but the code switching is just phenomenal. I mean, I resonated so much with those themes, talking one way to white people, talking another way to Black people, saying something that means something to white people, but means something different to Black. I mean, I do this every day. I don't have much of a choice. I do this all the time. And it was interesting me reading James, realizing, oh my God, I do this.
Well, so I think we're going to talk at greater length about this, and I wanted to sort of use this as a coming attractions moment, because I feel very strongly that what you just said, that we have sort of a real progression in the way we tell stories, in the way we engage with the story for the past, in the way we retell them. One of my first teachers in this is a rabbi named Mitchell Chaffetz, who wrote a book called Seventh Telling, which is probably the easiest way to enter Jewish mysticism for most people is through this novel. It's not a great novel, but it's a great Jewish mysticism teaching. And one of the things he offers, Rabbi Chaffetz, is the idea that there should be no retelling of a story where we don't actually live through it again, where we don't actually learn something new from the telling. Because if we're just, in my reading of him, if we're just pressing play on something that we've told before, we're not engaged in conversation. We're not engaged even with conversation with ourselves, with our memory. Our memories change. Our stories change. And the story that Mark Twain offers has shown us over and over again that our engagement with Huckleberry Finn has changed and evolved and devolved and changed again, that it's been an ongoing living argument, that our conversation as put forward by W.E. Du Bois over the history of Reconstruction continues to be an ongoing change. We still have, we covered a book by Professor Sinha about the Second American Reconstruction, where he gives a 2020 update to Black Reconstruction. And now we are going to enter into conversation with Percival Everett about what does Huckleberry Finn look like through the eyes of an enslaved person from the perspective of somebody in 2024 or 2023, whenever he wrote the book. And this is the living narrative of who we are as people, of who we are as Americans. And if we're not engaged in it, we're engaged in propaganda and lying to ourselves and each other. And when we engage in public falsehoods, we all suffer. So what I hope to see for next time is how James is going to offer us all a new way into telling an old truth in a revised way. in a compelling way, in a way that allows us to participate in something that is transformative and hopefully for a better future for us all. Any other final thoughts? Yes, Barb.
It's not a thought. It's just a reminder that before next week's session is the Good Troubles March in Buffalo.
Absolutely. So a week from today, July 17th, I believe,
Yes.
is the next Good Troubles March. So please, if you want to show up for that, please do feel free. Thank you for reminding me. A week from today also, on Thursday, July 17th, is our next walk together.
Yes.
And we are meeting at the MLK Park on the east side at 5:30. Same bat time, same bat channel. So that and our walk with us is an opportunity for us to, in fact, just be together. We don't broadcast it, we don't record it. We want to, build trusting relationships and walking together. So that's going to happen next week at this time. 2 weeks again on Thursday, July 24th. We will be back here both on Zoom and at the Buffalo Erie County Public Library on 1 Lafayette Square to talk about James. And then in 3 weeks, on the final Thursday in July, to complete our quintet of Thursdays, since July is a long month with 5 Thursdays this year. We are going to be at the Michigan Avenue African American Heritage Corridor to tour the Nash House. We will pick up the fee for the Nash House for anybody who shows up. But I'll send more information about that via email. Chris, you want to say something? No? No, thank you. Pastor Hughes?
This was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you all for being here. Yes, Tay?
I just wanted to say, I'm not sure I'm going to be in Wisconsin with my grandkids on our next, when we're going to talk about James. I'm hoping I can make it, but if I don't make it, it's not because I didn't want to.
Okay, well, the recording will be out there on YouTube and as a podcast, as all of ours are.
Okay, good.
So, because we do record the stuff that we do on Zoom,
Right.
Thank you all. Blessings all. I so appreciate all of you. I feel like we are at the beginning of something, that these conversations are beginning to turn into doings, not just talkings. And I am honored by all of you contributing and leading me in that direction.
Well, let's hope it's an evolutionary process
Amen to that.
and things are getting better. Yes.
Oh, God willing.
In this country. Well, that's what I'm hoping in this country, is all the problems now will evolve into something better. But
Thank you
science-
all. Thank you, Pastor Hughes, for being my accomplice for justice.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all for your contributions.
Well,
Great.
Thank you guys